Morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We made it to the end of the week. Looking forward to talking to you today about understanding self and others. It's our final Learning at Work Week webinar. Where the hell has this week gone? It's just extraordinary. So congratulations for making it to the end of the week. If you've attended any of our other webinars, I hope you've really enjoyed it, and it's given you that personal reflection that you kind of needed. So we're going to get going in a couple of minutes. As always, for those of you that know our style on these webinars, it'd be great if you could just say hello in the chat, who you are, the organisation that you work for, and the role that you have. It's always really great to understand more who's joining us and who I'm talking to this morning. So please just say hello, your name, and the role and the organisation. So thank you so much. Jane, thank you so much. Great to have you here. Bethany, Natalie, Laura, Geraldine, Kelly. Oh, wonderful. Some familiar names and faces. I can't see anybody, but really great that you're joining us this morning. I'm super excited to be rounding off a immense week for us in terms of Learning at Work Week. And I hope that you, in any of your activities that you might have been doing in your organisations, have been having a really good and successful week. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to get going in a minute. But I can see people coming in and saying hello, which is really awesome. I'm really excited to be talking to you this morning. So thank you so much for joining. And my handy helper today is the wonderful Charlie, based in Tbilisi. So you may see him popping up, keeping me on track, making sure that I stick to the script, and also checking in and pushing questions if you have any during this webinar. So you'll kind of see Charlie around and about on this webinar this morning. So thank you. Brilliant. Love it. Wonderful. So good morning, everybody. It's 9:02, and I normally start at that time. So I think we'll get going as per normal. So hi, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jo. I'm MD and founder of Let's Talk Talent. Our aim and purpose, or our mission, the reason why we get out of bed every day, is to help individuals, teams and organizations keep and grow brilliant people. And this week is all about helping you do that, but from your perspective. What's really important to us is to help the community that we serve. And, you know, one of our values is kind people are our kind of people. And this is us living it and breathing it every day. So Learning at Work Week for us has been really about giving back to the HR community and supporting you in your own personal effectiveness, making you great HR superpowers. And you'd have seen throughout this week that we've been kind of looking at not only the skills, training, attributes, and relationships, but we've also looked at time management and delegation. We've looked at mindfulness yesterday. We've looked at sort of courage on Wednesday. And today we're kind of rounding it all up and turning it back and looking at how we understand ourselves and how we take that and put that into practice in understanding others. And when we say others, we're talking about not only you and your teams, but also the organization as a whole. So hopefully you're going to get some real insights, but also insights on yourself today, because we're going to be doing some exercises with you. So a little bit, hopefully less of me talking. Well, we are going to hear me talk, but we're also going to hopefully get you to do some personal reflection, which I'm really excited to understand a little bit more. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to really focus the learning around yourselves. So the more that we understand ourselves, the more that we can help others and we can help the organization. And, you know, self-reflection, understanding ourselves is core to leadership, but it's also core to work and personal life ultimately. So the more that we understand ourselves, it helps us better understand others, and it creates better relationships, because it goes from a logical and probably transactional relationship into much more of a deep emotional connection. And anyone that knows me will know that I'm much more interested in how you create those better relationships than having transactional relationships. We all have different friends and we have different peers and we have different relationships. But for me, the best relationships are where you're there's a mutuality and you're giving back. We're going to look at the fundamentals of knowing what you stand for. So we're going to look at values and super strengths, which I absolutely adore, and what enables you to think about what sets you apart, and how you can kind of make that stick. And finally, we're going to remind you of some of the things that you probably already know. You know, a lot of you will be very self-aware sitting on this webinar, I have no doubt. But maybe you haven't been doing, and there's kind of some blind spots, and you're kind of thinking about, okay, so how do I kind of put this into practice, and how do I make myself even better than I already am? Sound like a plan? Wonderful. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, would you rather be liked or respected? So just put into the chat whether you'd rather be liked by others or respected by others. Love it. So you're also resoundingly respected. Wonderful. So let me ask you, why? Why do you feel that it's better to be respected than liked? Emma, you've hit the absolute nail on the head. You want to run this webinar for me? I love it. Absolutely brilliant. Because we do have to sometimes make decisions that are not going to be liked, or have to give people feedback. And if we're respected, it's more likely to land than if we've, in a way, just surface being liked. And I want to, as a leader, and I've wanted to be led by leaders that I've respected. I've not always liked them, because they can be quite tricky at times. But you know where you are. There's an honesty, there's a transparency around that. But respect is earned. It can go in a heartbeat, because it deals with trust. If you're trusted, then you're respected. And I think, Natalie, you're right. And Anthony, you say respect who I am, being like who they are. I think that's absolutely right. It's turning it back on yourself. And Natalie, you're saying, to be taken seriously at work in my role, it is more important to be respected. I love all your comments. I agree with the majority of them, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for doing that little exercise. So when we understand ourselves, it's thinking about how we build that respect, how we build that trust, rather than always thinking about how we liked. And when I look at my, I did a personality profile recently on saboteurs and my saboteurs. And it was done by Positive Psychology. And what was interesting about this psychometric, or a test in effect, was that my two saboteurs, my first one is restless, which has nothing to do necessarily with this, but fundamentally it means that I am always focused on the future rather than the present. But the reason why I mention this is that my second is pleaser. And when my pleaser saboteur comes in, that's when I go to want to be liked. And that's where I don't necessarily deal with things as quickly as my gut would tell me to, because I'm too worried about whether that person is going to like me and pleasing them, rather than actually sometimes doing the right thing that's right for me and what's right for the business. So however self-aware we are, sometimes some people that we come into contact with really pull us into that like rather than into that respect. So it's really, it's interesting to kind of look at it in that way, that however self-aware we are, sometimes we might have blind spots, and I definitely do. That's what's coming out in my saboteur about pleasing, is that sometimes I will default to like, rather than I know that I would rather, as a leader, be respected. Charlie's going to send the Saboteur link if anybody wants to do it. It's a completely free tool, and it's been really enlightening to me. So I hope that it could be enlightening to you. Okay, brilliant. So let's have a look now when we're thinking about understanding ourselves. Two core anchors: values and strengths. And we're going to do two exercises that are you're going to determine your values and you're going to determine your super strengths. Brilliant. Okay. So what I want you to think about in a minute, I'm going to put up a list that might help you. Now this can be personal or professional, because we're ultimately a combination of both, right? When we're working. The top 5 things that you value the most. So I'm going to give you a minute to do this. Jot them down on the screen, and here are some examples. You don't have to take any of them, but this hopefully gets you started. So put the top 5 things that you value the most. So take a minute. Okay, about another 20 seconds. Brilliant. So some of you are putting your top 5. So you've preempted what I wanted to tell you to do. So those are your top 5. Brilliant. What I want you to do is I want you to take 2 out and go with your top 3. So look at that list and give me your top 3. Love it. Some brilliant, brilliant values here. Brilliant. Wonderful. So a lot around family, a lot about caring, a lot about autonomy, a lot around honesty. So was anybody surprised by their values? Was this easy to do? Yeah? So there wasn't anything that you thought, okay. Jane, it's hard to choose the 5. And it's a balance, isn't it? Becca, you make a really good point about, you know, how do you differentiate between work and personal values? Because ultimately understanding ourselves is a combination of both, right? We don't want to turn up for work in one mode and in life in another mode. So sometimes integrating the two can be difficult. And when people put family, a lot of people sometimes when we do this webinar worry that that's got nothing to do with what is absolutely intrinsic to who you are as a person. Your values are the backbone of ultimately who you are in work and out of work. I totally agree with you, Anthony. Work and personal values are typically the same. You don't stop being who you are once you step into the office. Absolutely. But when we find that when we work with a lot of aspiring managers or new managers, they feel they need to be different. And when you're early in your career, sometimes you're figuring out who you are. But your values throughout your life, the top 5, may change in terms of the order in which you put your top 5, but they don't tend to change because they are intrinsically who you are. And the reason why I wanted to do that was really just to get us very centered in terms of, if we know that we want to be respected, our values play a huge part in both overtly and covertly, giving people an idea of who we are and who they're working for. So understanding yourself and understanding your values is really key to being vulnerable sometimes as a leader and letting people know who you are and what you stand for. And this is a great exercise to use with your team. If someone's struggling to figure out why they might be a bit discombobulated with work or where they want to go in their career, doing this exercise with somebody and really understanding what makes them tick is a great way of driving that deeper emotional connection and that deeper relationship. So hopefully that gives you a really quick tool that you can use in understanding others as much as you just doing it in terms of understanding yourself. Brilliant. So when we think about values, if they are the core of who we are, they also play a massive part in our beliefs. Our values drive our beliefs, and where we want to work and who we want to work for. They also shape our attitudes, our attitudes and our behaviors in the way that we operate with others, and what we enjoy, environments we enjoy working in, and people we like working for, businesses that have in a way, like sandpaper rubbed up against our beliefs, drive different types of attitudes and behaviors. It all stems back ultimately to our values. The end result is who we are is a combination of those values driving beliefs, sorting our attitudes, and ultimately coming out in terms of our behaviors. So I think that's a really important thing to think about, that values drive not only the way that we operate, but they also drive the way that we interact and how that plays a part in culture and team dynamics, ultimately. Make sense? Okay. So now if we look at values and we see them as an important part of our beliefs and our attitudes and behaviors, let's really now think about super strengths. So things that set us apart, that we're brilliant at. And at the moment, it's sometimes when we're really busy and we're coming to the end of the week, it's really hard to think about, not only what we did on Monday, but also how we did it and whether we're actually sometimes doing a great job. Charlie and I were talking about that this week, and kind of the immense week that we've had and fun week that we've had. But sometimes we forget that we're pulling on a lot of our super strengths a lot of the time. And we take a lot of that for granted. And sometimes we take that for granted in others. So I want to do a little exercise with you around super strengths. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And again, I'd love you to put into the chat. And I love the way that you're all helping each other as well, and commenting on each other's thoughts and feelings. It's brilliant. Thank you for doing that. So the first question I want to ask you, and take a moment to think about it, is what have you done recently that really energized you? I love this question. I use it a lot in coaching. Emma went for a lunchtime walk in the sunshine for half an hour, spent some time alone, became a coach, team meeting, wonderful, signed up for my master's, went for a book club, started a keto diet, long walks, beach walk, house clear out, sea swimming, walk challenge, couch to 5K, love it, clear off my credit card, brilliant, Eurovision, oh, I love it, Maxine, I would have liked to have come with you, signed up for the Open University, brilliant. So loads and loads of different ways in which you individually get energized, right? So for me, being energized is where I'm at my most creative, and I share a lot of the things that Charlie did a track day in a friend's sports car. For me, I just come back from Italy, and the experiences that I had there completely energized me and drove me back to getting back my mojo that I think I felt I'd lost a little bit before I went away, which is probably normal, but it really energized me. So whatever energizes you, it's important to hold on to. So let me ask you the second question. So what have you done that was completely effortless for you? It's different, right? Talking with colleagues, gardening. Gardening, daily washing, binge watching, visiting family, reading, Netflix, cook for my family, housework, spent time, taking time to be a mum, love it. Cuddling cats, reading, sunbathing, scrolling on social media, playing with the dog. Yes, Duncan, you're totally right. That's much harder, as most simple things are hard. Exactly. So interestingly, everything that I've asked you, done recently that energized you, and that you've done that was completely effortless, most of you actually haven't focused on work. And that's super interesting, right? That when we're thinking about our strengths, we're automatically going to things that we're not doing on a daily basis. So walking, seeing family, watching TV, driving to work. Claire's put praising colleagues, practicing mindfulness. A lot of it is about us, isn't it? What's motivating us sometimes are the simple things and things that are effortless is that we do in our everyday lives. And when we overcomplicate it and take it into work, we're leaving a part of who we are, because actually some of the things that we're doing aren't giving us that energy and aren't as effortless. It takes a lot. It takes more time, doesn't it, to manage people, to do some of the things that we're doing, to create strategies, to kind of be that well-rounded person in work. Sometimes isn't as effortless as it is just being human and being ourselves. So when we're thinking about these questions, I think it's really important and use them in your coaching and use them with your team to start to think about how you bring some of the things that are effortless and you that are really energizing into the way that you work. Because the more that you do that, then the more joy and the more that you become able to sort of cope with all of the different changes and all of the different elements that exist in our lives. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Lisa, it doesn't make sense, or oh, no questions. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, just checking. And Christina, you're absolutely right. It does take a lot of energy to be the work persona sometimes. And I don't know whether this has given you a light bulb moment, but it really has for me, that we've got to bring our whole selves. And it is hard at the moment, working and being in control of our whole being. So give yourself a break, because this stuff is tricky. But hopefully that's given you some light bulbs, and take these questions away. We'll be sending you a recording, but take these questions away and think about them more, but also think about them with your team and with others. They're great opportunities to self-reflect. So if we think about values and we think about super strengths, I've been talking a lot about motivation, joy, energy. And really and truthfully, all of these things add up to how motivated and energized we are. And motivation for me falls into two main, buckets or pillars. The first is, and a lot of you will know this, extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation is where external factors leads to you becoming more energized, joyful. So that could be the environment in your organization, your colleagues, the weather, things that are not sorry, that was the dog, not able to be controlled by you. ultimately. Yeah, I know. Melissa, he's having a Zoomy moment. So my motivation has been curtailed by our chief dog officer, Dylan, who's having a good time. Hopefully you're having a good time as well. So it can have a positive and it can have a negative impact on our motivation and our energy. But extrinsic is not necessarily controlled by us, it's controlled by others. And then the flip of that is intrinsic, where we're but where that comes from us ultimately, and our values, beliefs, internal systems, ultimately. And I think motivation is a real factor in performance. When we talk about high performance, I talk about it as sort of motivation and contribution adding ultimately to high performance. If you're not motivated, if you're not energized, if you're not doing things that bring you joy, then how can you be tapping into your super strengths? How can you be enabling people to and yourself to be the best that you can be? So motivation for me is a massive factor in sort of understanding our, as we've talked about, our values, our strengths, our beliefs. But sometimes that is not always controllable by us, fundamentally. And this is a model that I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of an insight into, and it's called Social Styles, and it stems from motivation, very much being focused around the way that we are communicated to, and communicate. So we can be, if we're given a task and we're motivated and we communicated by giving a task, then we become much more sort of analytical and drivers. If we're more people orientated, then we've got more amiability and expressive. And I'll explain them in a little bit more detail in a minute. But also, when you think about this, it's how we're communicated. Could be we're asked to do something, or we're told to do something. And our influences, Jane, you're absolutely right, can switch in a moment. And the reason why I think this is really important is when you think about this in a little bit more detail, in terms of the task at the top, people, ask and tell, is that this builds out into sort of the way we communicate, but also the way that we're motivated. So sometimes I'm wearing a hat where I'm the driver. So let's take action. At the best, I'm really, I'm decisive, I'm practical, I'm efficient, I'm speaking with conviction, right? At the worst, I could be quite controlling, or I could be quite pushy, or not necessarily me, but people I've worked for could be driven by their ego, ultimately. If the other side is amiable, let's discuss, collaborative, collegiate. At the best, it's around dependability, loyalty, someone who really cares. At the worst, it can be feeling like someone's really dependent on you, could be overly emotionally or overly concerned with the small stuff. So I think it's a really important model, because it not only looks at social styles in terms of communication, but it also feeds back to what I talked about in terms of motivation, your values, your super strengths, because it gives us an idea of how we like to be communicated to, but also how we want to communicate, and the results of that on someone else's motivation. And remember, this webinar is not only about understanding ourselves, it's also about how we understand others. So thinking about where we are in that quadrant at any one time, and being quite deliberate about where we are in that quadrant, is an important factor to what you're going to get back from someone. So if you're a driver and you're trying to, and you're task orientated, and you're working with your opposite in terms of people orientated, expressive, are you butting heads? Are you like sandpaper? That could lead to discombobulation. It could lead to you not necessarily talking the same language. It's very similar to Insights and DISC, which you might have seen, some of you, and I know, Claire, you wanted to know what it was called. It was called Social Styles. So we can give you more information about that. So I want to ask you a question. And I think, Ronald, you're absolutely right, that everybody will have traits in all the 4 quadrants. You won't necessarily be one per se all the time, and that's really important to think about. But you'll have a predominant style, like you might do in DISC, for example, or Insights Discovery, in terms of the colors. You'll have one that you feel much more comfortable with. So let me ask you a question. Yes, I know he's got the doggy with the doggy toy. Sorry about that. Which of these speaks to you the most? So if you think about one of these quadrants, when you think about, if we were doing this exercise with you, and we do this more in a workshop, which would you think would be your predominant style? Amiable, brilliant, Jane. Analytic, brilliant. Amiable, analytic. People, great. So a lot of amiable and analytic. So sort of a lot of, you know, asking, people orientated, which doesn't surprise me in terms of the audience that I'm talking to today. You know, it would make complete sense that the people that are on here from an HR perspective will be much more expressive, amiable, and there'll be a combination of analytics and drivers. Fantastic. Well, if you want more information, really happy to give that to you offline, but hopefully that gives you, again, an idea of yourself. And as we've been building through this webinar, hopefully you've been getting a real picture of how this all flows together, and that we're an absolute microcosm of all of these things. And we can't just be driven by our values, and we can't just be driven by our super strength. We can't just be driven by communication either. They all add up to us being our whole selves and bringing our whole selves to work and feeling comfortable with that. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. There's one other model that I wanted to talk to you about, and this is VoicePrint. And this is a really interesting model, which predominantly works on the facets of communication. And if you want more information, I've got that at the end for you. But it works from an individual, a team, and also from a 360 perspective. So if anybody's wanting to understand more about their communication style and how you move from being liked to respected, this VoicePrint model is a great one. But it looks at the 9 facets of communication. It looks at 9 voices and into 3 particular boxes. The first box is around exploring voices, and that's where a lot of you who are coaches, you know, consultants, you know, HR leaders will know that a lot of the time we're sort of inquiring, we're probing and diagnosing, like you would as a doctor. For example, if you come in and you say, my knee hurts, they say, well, how long has it been hurting? How significant is the pain? How long has it been going on for? And then I'll diagnose you a solution. And that's what we do all the time, right? When we're talking to someone about a management or a poor performance, or, you know, creating some strategy, we're using those exploring voices. But a lot of the time we're also using positioning voices. So if we're mentoring, for example, we're using advising voices. If we're kind of picking a lane and we're really excited, like I am, I'm trying to position you around being an advocate around these tools and techniques and understanding yourself. I'm getting that energy, and hopefully I'm articulating well in that instance. And then if we're more direct and we want to tell people and give them direction, it's not about being negative, it's about controlling and making things better, then we're probably using those controlling voices: direct, challenge, and evaluate. And I love this tool. I've used it a lot in coaching and with teams, and it's light bulb moments to how the teams interact with each other. So you might have people that are very, very much about control, and they're not giving more reflectors and more opportunity to do exploration, because you're jumping to a solution. So again, if you'd like more information, it's another way of understanding yourself. So I really, you know, would love you to understand more about it. And thank you, Bethany, for saying I'm doing a good job. Sometimes when Dylan gets the zoomies, it puts me off, but I'm really glad that you're still hearing me and I'm still holding your attention. So brilliant. Yes, Jane, we're gonna share some more information about VoicePrint at the end. That's absolutely fine. I'm happy to do that. And if you want anything and you want to talk to me about it, then book a half-hour call with me. I'm really happy to go through it in more detail. But it will come at the end of these slides as well, and in the follow-up. Brilliant. So we spent a lot of time in this webinar, about 35 minutes, really focusing on ourselves. And I think that's really important, because this is about giving back to you as part of this Learning at Work week. But let's just pivot for a moment and think about how we sort of understand others, because a lot of what we've been talking about can be used in both contexts. So what do we mean when we say others? And when normally I ask this, most people think that it's about their direct reports, you know, but for me, and for you, it will absolutely be peers. It'll be people on this webinar. It'll be your team. It will be leaders, your CEO, your SLT, you know, partners that you might be working with, your own family, personal and professional. That would be you know, that's really, really important to think about. When we say others, it's not just in our immediate space. We can, it's top down, bottom up, sideways, horizontal, all of those things. So when we think about how we understand others and the traits that we need as leaders to better understand, here are just some of the, you know, ones that we really wanted to highlight to you today. And there's probably, you know, I'm going to ask you in a minute whether there are any others that you think that I might be missing. But in truly understanding others, sometimes it's important to talk less and listen more. And I can't do that on a webinar when I can only communicate with you through the chat. But if I was doing this in person, I'd be listening much more to what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing and what I'm not seeing and not hearing. So listening for me is a really important part of understanding others and driving that emotional connection that I talked at the beginning. Now, sometimes empathy and compassion are kind of joined into one. But the reason why we've separated it is empathy is about really understanding, I think, where someone's coming from. Compassion is really doing something about that and helping someone change. We can all be very good at being empathetic, and you can be empathetic to me today in knowing that a lot of you've got cats and dogs and know the traumas that happen there, but you can't fix that for me, right? And I think that that's really important. Compassion for me is an equal part in understanding, but actually doing, which in understanding others, sometimes we need, right? Role modeling. You know, we all want to work for people that, you know, walk the walk and talk the talk. So we really want people that, you know, don't just pay lip service to really wanting to get to know us, and, you know, and that drives respect and trust, doesn't it, ultimately, and care. So we want leaders that really role model those traits that we've talked about. You know, when the chips are down and things are not going right, and you talked about that in terms of liked and respected, you know, can be counted on to be there and communicate, but also to deliver what they're going to say they're going to do. So they're not going to overpromise and underdeliver ultimately, but they make time. You know, people make time to understand others. It doesn't become paying lip service. It's like, you know, not 5 minutes at the end of a Zoom call or a Teams call. It's really making concerted time. It's putting, you know, turning off your phone, your computer from instant messages. It's really focusing on that individual at that time. But also it's around feedback. If you understand others, you're willing to listen and you're willing to adapt, and your ego doesn't get in the way, and you're willing to give people feedback, but you're also willing to get that feedback to yourself, and you see that as an important part of understanding yourself and understanding others, and challenging and changing, and being courageous, ultimately, in that sense. Anything that you think I've missed in terms of traits that allow you to better, as a leader, better understand others? Humility, love that, Becca, and being approachable and flexible. Brilliant. Anything else? Empathy, approachable, adaptable. One that I think I've missed out is, brilliant, Rhiannon. Thank you. Vulnerability. I was just about to say that. You beat me to it. Fantastic. I think I've missed that. So I totally agree. Being open about making mistakes and learning. Thank you, Claire. I totally agree. Elizabeth, telling them you always have time and really living that. Brilliant. Open to learning, definitely. Brilliant. Thank you so much for adding to that. I'll make sure that when I do this again, that I've kind of added some of your thoughts and feelings into it. So thank you so much. That's brilliant. So if we think about the traits of leadership, let's have a think about how you might start to better understand others. And at LTT, we use this model around, which I really truly believe in, which is a combination of science, art, and humanity, because different teams respond to different ways of getting to know each other, and we've got a number of blogs that we can share with you around how to run team days, and a lot about some of the tools that we're talking about, because I can see in the chat that some of you want to know more about Social Styles, who published it, and Voiceprint. So we can give you all of that information. So that's fantastic. So when we think about science, this is, when things, really, excuse the language, but, when the shit hits the fan, you might be in understanding others, both individually as a team. Science is getting data, fundamentally. It's no more, no less than that. And it's digging deeper into why someone might be behaving in some way, why their performance has dropped, why things are perhaps in a team sense in more of a storming phase. And you could use MBTI, DISC, Insights, 16 personalities. You could use Social Styles. There's tons and tons of tools, and a lot of you will know a lot of them. But it's, getting data, I think, is an important part. You might not need to, because you might already have that. You could do a 360, for example. We've done that as a team ourselves, but it's getting some data, because really and truthfully, you're trying to understand, by understanding others, the dynamics that are at play, and you're also opening up and you're giving permission and the space for people to gain a better understanding of each other. And that's, that's not only from an individual perspective, but also from a team. When we think about art, well, basically, art is kind of, I suppose, the antithesis of the opposite to science in lots of ways, because art is really much more about that kind of, I think, blending the logic and the emotion together. And some of the tools, again, that we can give you more insight into is things like doing the 6-word story. So this is a exercise where you get your team, or you get an individual to think about the 6 words that sum up themselves, or your values, your purpose, your mission as an organization. It's going to be done in 15 minutes. And it's really creative, and it's really fun, and it gets people moving. And we've got a blog around some of our favorite tools, and this is one of my favorites, so I wanted to share it today. You could do a live 360. You could look at what we've done today, values, super strengths, drivers, motivators, and a lot of the time with the art, it's getting people out of their environment. So if you're doing this on an individual basis, really having some one-to-one time, face-to-face, but it also could be a team day. and I'm going to give you some more information about that. So understanding others, that could be really good. Disc, there is a free, I think there is a small free version, but it's not hugely expensive, Claire. Live 360, there is a cost to do that again, but they're very cost effective. So I'm happy to talk to you about them if that's helpful. And then humanity. So this is about putting the H into human resources, so the human back into human resources, because ultimately it's all about people, right? This is more about, I suppose, the normal things that you do on an everyday basis. So this is about routines. So how do you build stand-ups? How do you build one-to-ones? How do you build team days? How do you create well-being sessions? You know, even asking a question, how are you? That important, and really asking it rather than just kind of, how are you? How was your weekend? You know, taking that time. And we as a team not only do that as a core team once a week on a Monday for 45 minutes, but also we have an associate pool, and we make sure that we get together each month with our associates, and we do well-being sessions. So I'm trying to build that community, even though I don't work with, you know, with all of the people that, you know, work for me. I think it's really important to put that human back. So lots of opportunities for you to give of yourself, fundamentally, and do build that into your regular routine rather than waiting for things to happen or go wrong. So let's just give you a couple of examples of things that you might be able to do in a team day. So taking some of the science, art and humanity and putting them into action. So the first was a day that we did in Paris for London and Partners. It was for a particular leader who was wanting to build better collaboration and communication, because all of her team were based across Europe, and they hardly ever got together. So she was new as a leader within that team, and she had a particular direct, I would say, a dominant, if you look at DISC, dominant style that was in a way creaking with members of her team that were finding it really difficult, to be frank. And we ran a 3-hour session for them to help the team better understand how to get the best out of working together. So DISC was a great tool to be able to do that, but really got people to start to understand and have some light bulb moments around how they could better not only bring the human back into the way that they were working, but also understand each other's triggers, which they were missing before that. And it actually not only had an effect on the team, but it also had effect on that leader, who realized that her style was really different. So she was really very big on red and green, and most of her team were blue and yellow, and that was having an effect on her confidence. And she'd, in a way, lost the trust of her team. So in building that, she's kind of looked at how she can focus on herself. So there's been some additional coaching around her own style to think about how that can have better impact for her and ultimately her team. The other example is with the Cumberland, where the Cumberland's going through a big transformation at the moment, and the IT team is an integral part of it. And they wanted to think about, again, how they not only looked and focused around what they needed to do, but how they better communicated together. And they were definitely much more in a storming phase. So they had been together probably for a year as a team, and they were really going through some discombobulation. So we built a number of exercises for them over 2 days. They were off site. We did coaching walks. And so that leadership team are much more focused on how they become the leadership of the IT team, but also how they then disseminate that into their teams. So you not only have light bulb moments where people are understanding themselves, they're understanding others as a team, but then they're really manifesting that in terms of how they then take that back into the business. So you've kind of got the trifecta of individual, team and organization in that example. And hopefully that brings a lot of this to life. So let's recap before I give you some offers. And really and truthfully, it boils down to these 2 points. You know, if we're understanding ourselves and others, we're gaining a greater awareness of our values, our strengths, our motivators. And we've spent a lot of time in this webinar looking at that, because fundamentally that enables us to better understand the relationship and build better relationships. And if we go back to the first question that I asked you at the beginning, which was whether you would rather be liked or respected, better relationships are driven by respect. So thank you so much for joining me in this webinar this morning, and I promised you some offers at the end, so hang on for a couple of minutes and then I'll let you go. The first is, if you're interested in doing anything specific around team building away days, whether that's for your team or for teams within your business, hopefully the examples I've given you show you the type of style that we do. But if you'd like to chat to us in more detail about booking some time to discuss, then really happy to. They're always bespoke and really tailored to your needs, and they can be run in collaboration and in partnership with you. The second is, if any of you are thinking about yourselves, or you've got leaders in your business and that want to use some of the tools that we've talked about, so VoicePrint, for example, or actual just coaching or mentoring, we have a coach on demand solution which works from an individual but also works for teams as well. So if anyone would like more information, it's a paid service. We're really happy to talk to you about it, and it's incredibly cost effective and gives you an opportunity to better understand yourself but also enable other people to understand themselves. Alongside all of the other things that you know that we do, we've got some up and coming free webinars. All of our webinars up until July are on our website, so please feel free to click into them. And I like this, and there's no charge, so please feel free to come along to any of them. And they are always a combination of you doing some work and us giving you some insights and examples of things that we've done to bring it to life, so you can see and hopefully imagine how that might work within your organization. So feel free to sign up to anything. Really happy to have you on any of these webinars. If anyone particularly is interested in communication, some of the things that we talked about today around, you know, the art of communication, we have a number of standalone webinars, but we also have a communication bootcamp, which is 4 90-minute workshops, all delivered virtually. Coaching sessions can be are recommended for embedding the learning, and we also do VoicePrint as part of that. So if anyone would like to know more information about our boot camps, we've got a range of them, then please feel free to give me a shout. VoicePrint, I promised you that I would give you more information about, and there's VoicePrint is a company in standalone. It's run by a wonderful man called Alan from TalkWise, but it's a fantastic assessment, so very much happy to talk to you about it, and we've got some great VoicePrint coaches who can help you. So if you'd like to register and know more about it, then we're happy to do that. And finally, if you want to just have a chat and you want to kind of pick up on anything that I've talked about today in this webinar, then book a 30-minute conversation with me. There's no selling. I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I'm just interested in what's going on in your organization and how I might be able to help you formally or informally. So if it's useful for you and you just want to pick up on anything, or you just want some inspiration or some ideas, or just want to have a moan about something, then feel free to book me for a 30-minute chat, ultimately. Thank you so much for coming along today. I really hope that you've enjoyed it. And for those of you that have been on other webinars this week, thank you for supporting us, and thank you for supporting Learning at Work Week and giving yourself the permission to learn. I've thoroughly enjoyed all of the webinars this week, and I've really enjoyed leading a couple of them and having the opportunity to hopefully inspire you to support yourselves, because it starts with us. Ultimately. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful weekend when you get to it. Enjoy it, rest well, and we'll hopefully see you in the coming weeks on other webinars that we do. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for the feedback, everybody. Really appreciate it.